Welcome back to Fox 26 Crime Files. I am Abigail Dye. This week we are diving in to the most wanted illegally present non-citizens here in Houston. So ICE has their own list, DPS has their own list. We picked a few suspects off these lists to delve into and tell you about these crimes. These are people who were convicted, not accused, convicted of felonies, who entered the U.S. illegally to commit those felonies and now have re-entered the U.S. and are wanted. I'm joined now by Andy Kahan with Houston Crime Stoppers. Andy is the man to talk to about crimes here in the Houston area. You always have something to say.
That is true.
A lot of knowledge.
You can advocate on behalf of one faction. You will generally infuriate the other faction, and I have a tendency to do both.
Yeah, he does it professionally. So we are going over a few citizens, illegally present, non-citizens rather, who are believed to be here in the Houston area, and ICE is looking for these three people. So we're talking about Julian Bocanegra Lupain, Armando Flores Aguilar, and our third person is Luis Perez Mendoza. So the first person here that we're talking about, Bocanegra, so he is on the ICE most wanted list.
As he should be.
He has been accused of re-entering the U.S. illegally a few different times, but the most egregious crime that he's accused of is murder.
He's a convicted murderer and was sentenced of capital murder, actually, and was given a life sentence.
Yes.
You would have thought that's the end of the story. We shouldn't even be talking today, but that's just where we're beginning the end of the story. Not even the end of the story. This is where we're beginning, where we are right now.
Yeah, you would sure think so. And this happened back in 1993. Well, he was convicted.
Happened in 93. You weren't even born, I'll bet.
Yeah, I wasn't.
1993. I was the victim advocate in the mayor's office back then. Okay, and so
I was just a thought.
Yes, you were. You were waiting to reemerge, and here we are right now talking about a 1993 murder case that just happened to pop right back into your life right here. When you showed me this, Abigail, first of all, you see my hair? Whatever two strands that were on here, gone. This is absolutely insane.
It really is.
It's outrageous. So let's just get into this. He gets a life. You think that's it. Okay, eventually you come up for parole. That's just normal procedure. He doesn't get paroled. They just deport him and ship him out. He gone.
Yeah.
Then he come back.
And so that was how long after? About 20 years?
Yeah, almost 20 years, which is standard because that would have been probably his first eligibility back then. In 1993, right. Capital murder, you would have to do 20 years. So the first time he's eligible for release, which is so rare for anyone convicted of murder, whether you're here legally or or illegally, whatever the two are right there, you normally don't get released on your first parole review. But somehow he gets out and they think they're deporting him and you'll never see him again because he's gone, he's out of the country.
Yeah. And according to this ICE bio that they have for him, so in 93 in Harris County, he was convicted of homicide. Well, it was murder, and then sentenced to life in prison.
You know, if you go back and you look at the murder, I mean, this was part of an organized criminal gang. This guy was part of a big-time gang.
And that was only one of the people that he killed, according to this Baytown Sun article, I believe it is.
Yeah.
This is a newspaper article that we found from, back in the 90s on this crime. And it says that they describe it as a shotgun murder, and he killed a 14-year-old. And then also a 20-year-old.
Which is why it's capital murder, because he murdered more than one person. Yeah. Yet we thought it was in the best interest of public safety not to keep you locked up behind bars where you couldn't harm anyone else. We just thought we'd ship you back to the country like, duh, you're not going to come back. Get real.
Yeah, and that is just the crazy part about this. So that ICE bio goes on to say that in August of 2012, so just about 20 years after his conviction, he was transferred to ICE ERO custody and removed to Mexico for the first time.
Yes, and then 7 years later, he's back.
Yeah. And so, it goes on to say that he illegally re-entered the U.S. in November 2019, and ICE again.
So my question when I saw this was, okay, he's illegally here. There's an actual federal charge called illegal re-entry.
Yes.
When you're deported, and I'm like, how come that's not filed? I'm like, wait a second. You should have been in a federal penitentiary.
Right.
20 years.
And so this is what I'm really confused about here, Andy. How is it that someone can commit a capital murder and be convicted of it and be on parole? And if you were to be in the U.S. and you violated your parole, you'd go right back to prison. But he didn't do that. He didn't go to a U.S. penitentiary. He was removed to Mexico.
Right. So, at first you don't succeed, try again. So we figured, okay, we tried the first time to boot you out. You came back. Let's try it again. And I'm going, well, no, hold back. What you should have done was, look, this guy is blatantly violated his conditions of parole. But the question remains, and that we've got to find out, is does someone who actually gets deported on a life sentence actually have parole conditions to abide by if he re-enters the country? Like if I'm doing life because I'm a citizen, I have conditions of parole that I have to abide by, and if I violate those conditions,
then you go
I
right back
could
to
go
prison.
back.
Yeah.
None of that happens with this guy here. Not only that, so he gets a break there. He gets a break because he doesn't get federally charged for illegal re-entry. So you're thinking, okay, well, maybe the second time's a charm, but he back.
And I know you love the term get out of jail free card. This is the get out of prison free card that I've never seen.
This is the ultimate get out of jail free card because he's a convicted capital murderer, and we keep saying, oh, well, if we ship you out and deport you, you're not going to. That doesn't work that way. Yeah. This really needs to be rectified, and I hope this legislative session that we get this issue addressed, because to me, Abigail, the big question is there's one. How many others are like this?
There's nothing stopping these people from coming back into the U.S.
I'm going to age myself. I'll go back to when I first started my career as a victim advocate in the mayor's office. Houston's first big drive-by shooting was an 11-year-old girl named Jennifer Morose. It was in A-Leaf area. She was at a birthday party. These two guys drove by, fired shots into the window in the living room, and 11-year-old Jennifer Morose was killed. There were two suspects that were eventually charged. Both of them were not here legally, but the only one we could find was one of the suspects, and he got 70 years. 70 years in prison. Years later, and I got to know the family. I got to know Jennifer's family. And I remember getting a question from her. She sent me an email saying, hey, just, checking to see what happened with this guy. Is he still locked up? So I go look, and he's gone. I'm like, okay, what happened to him? Was he paroled? No, I'm told he was deported. The victim's family was the same thing, almost the same year, just about.
Yeah.
Within a 1 year time period, they deported him. Victim's family isn't told he's deported, and who's to say he's not back? I have no clue if he's back or not. But the bottom line was, you're almost rewarded if you're here illegally and you're convicted of murder, and if you get deported. Because if you are a U.S. citizen charged with murder, more than likely you're not getting out.
Right, and you would have to abide by those parole conditions.
Absolutely.
If you did parole.
Correct. So
that is
it's oxymoronic. It simply defies any semblance of logic.
It really does. It's hard to wrap my head around, and it makes me wonder, what are the conditions when these people are removed? Because we hear about
there
these
any
removals,
conditions?
Right? And I think people, a certain, I don't want to politicize it too much, but a lot of people look at this and they're like, oh, it's good that we're removing dangerous criminals, but
guess what? They come back.
Safe? Right?
There's nothing to stop anybody from coming back.
Yeah.
And when they come back, the question is, do we still have any contingencies on them, particularly if you're on parole? And we just did a story with your station about a month ago highlighting sex offenders who were deported out of the country after they took a plea deal for deferred adjudication. And I remember looking at Randy Wallace going, there's nothing to stop them from coming back. So the question is, what happens when they come back? That's the $1 million question. Are they still under the conditions like any other offender would be under?
Right. Is removing dangerous, illegally present non-citizens actually protecting the American people?
It's a great question. I mean, you feel some sort of comfort when you hear that, but the reality is they do come back. And we've seen it time after time and time again, ad nauseum. So I think the bigger question is you can't give some false sense of security to the American public by saying, you know, we're going to, after you're convicted, we're going to deport you, and that's the end of the story. That's actually just the beginning of the story.
Yeah. And that's exactly how this story is ending here. It does say that ICRO received information that Bocanegra is back in the U.S. The next wanted illegally present non-citizen on our list is from the DPS most wanted list. So they believe that Armando Flores Aguilar right here is here in the Houston area. It says that Armando Flores Aguilar is a criminal illegal immigrant from Mexico with ties to Harris County, including the city of Houston, Texas. It says that Aguilar was previously removed from the United States back in '99. In May of 2024, Aguilar was arrested for sex abuse of a child.
Which means he had to re-enter the country.
Yeah.
You're here, but you were deported, right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be here.
Back in '99.
Right.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be here.
And so he came into the country illegally, was removed, and committed
But he wasn't
this crime.
charged with another crime for illegal reentry, was he?
It doesn't
Probably
look like
not.
it. Not
No.
according to this bio.
No,
Not
because
according
if he
to this
was,
bio.
we wouldn't be talking about this case because he'd be locked up in a federal prison.
You would think.
Yes.
Right? And it just goes to show it's another case of this. It says that, yeah, in May of 2024, so just last year, he was arrested for the continuous sexual assault, abuse of a child under 14, and that was in Bastrop County.
So he's already been given probation, right, for the other one, or what?
So this is the same charge.
Oh,
he
same charge, okay.
He entered the U.S. illegally in '99.
All right.
Then he gets hit with, in 2024, he gets hit with the child sexual, and he was released from jail
so this
on
was bond. Let me get. How do you? Okay, this is gonna send me
I
in
know.
fuego.
I
on
knew this
fire.
was gonna piss
Okay,
you off.
Cue the volcano going up right now. How do you justify granting bond to someone in the country illegally charged with a sexually related offense of a child? That makes zero sense. You're setting this up for failure.
It's hard for me to look at this and rationalize it as well, and I hope that everyone watching feels the same way, because and it's child sexual abuse. We're not
You're
talking
here in the
about
country illegally, and
Yeah.
you're charged with a felony, child sexual abuse of a child, and you're granted bond, even though you're
Released
here
on bond.
illegally, and
Of course he's going to run. Of course he's
No,
going
he's
to
not
run.
stupid.
No one is going to, he's not going to come back and show up for his court appearances. It is. And so, yes.
Sorry, I just gotta laugh at the lunacy of all this.
I don't disagree with you, Andy. And so it says on September 20th of 24, they issued warrants for his arrest, of course.
So now we're looking for him again?
Yeah, and so they added 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault on a child and another count of indecency.
So now we got
with a
4.
child. So now we have 4 counts.
4 sexual charges, all involving a children, all from a guy who shouldn't be here. None of this, and all because he was whatever. The illegal reentry back into the country would have prevented 4 people from being victims of sexual assault.
4
because
children.
He should have been locked up. Now you got 4 people that have a lifetime of trauma, emotional grief, pain, and agony, and none of it should have ever happened. I'm just again, I'm trying to figure out the rationale for this, and I can't.
And how he was allowed to post bond.
That blows me away.
It looks like the bond was set at $10,000 for each.
First of all, that is so chump feed low bond for anybody. albeit for someone that's not even supposed to be
because you
here.
don't have to
That's
pay the full $10,000.
So $1,000 he gets out. Now he's wanted for 4 counts of sexual abuse of children. Lovely.
Luis Perez Mendoza. This is another one who is on the DPS most wanted list. And it says that Mendoza is a criminal illegal immigrant from Mexico with ties to Montgomery County, including Conroe. They think that that's where he might be at this point. It says that Mendoza has numerous arrests out of Montgomery County dating back to the early 2000s. They say ag robbery, injury to a child, assault causing bodily injury, terroristic threat, evading. And I do believe that his most recent one was...
He gets basically 3 years probation for felony assault of a public servant. So in 2023, he's giving probation. How do you, again...
After this rap sheet.
Yes, after someone who's entered the country illegally, who should have been in a federal penitentiary, how do you justify putting someone on probation?
And so this is the thing. It says in 2012, he was removed from the United States. In 2012. So we're talking a couple of decades ago. And then in April of 2020, he was convicted of illegal reentry. So he was charged and convicted with an immigration violation.
He's back.
Clearly.
So he couldn't have done much time.
No, he really couldn't have.
They probably convicted and deported him. Pretty much the same.
I mean, it sounds like that's probably what happened. It keeps happening with these cases that we're watching.
Let's think about this in theory. You're giving probation, which basically means you're telling the person to remain here, because now you're on probation and you have to abide by the conditions of probation, even though you know he's not supposed to be here. But by putting him on probation, you're telling him, yes, you have to be here because now you're on probation. Wow. And guess what? You think he's going to actually report to a probation officer? You're delusional. He gone, so now he's a fugitive again. I mean, I could have wrote the script before you even
had. And they know they're at risk of deportation. I almost feel, like you said earlier, I almost feel like it's kind of a loophole. If you're deported, you might have a better chance.
You're deported, you're
rewarded. Getting free. Yeah, at getting back into the U.S. and not behind bars.
Correct. No one's monitoring, no one's looking, no one knows you're back here until either someone rats you out or you're charged with another crime. Nobody's going to even know. But in the meantime, you're off the hook. Just like the guys, we were talking about earlier with a life sentence for capital murder. You're done. Pretty much you're done. There's numerous questions that I have. Number one, questions from TDCJ. When they deport somebody, are they still obligated to be under state custody only in another country, and are they violating their parole if they return, and if so, can they be sent back to prison?
I think that is the big question here. Does your parole withstand removal from the United States?
Correct.
If it doesn't, then why?
You're going to find that out for us, aren't you?
Yes. I'll continue to dig on these cases and on that exact issue, because that is something that we need to know, especially with these removals being so prevalent.
Right. I mean, it sounds great on the news, being removed, and I'm going, okay, guess what? That doesn't really mean what happens if they return.
What does that mean? Is it a false sense of security for people?
It's obvious here. You have multiple people who became victims of individuals who were convicted of rather heinous crimes, which I certainly believe capital murder and other offenses fit that category, that have now come back and re-victimized other people, which never should have happened.
He was removed in 2012, right? 2020, he was convicted of an immigration violation for being back in the United States. And he was removed again. So he was removed in 2012 and then removed in 2020. And then in 2022, he was charged with assaulting. Yes. So in 2022, he was charged with assaulting the officer. 23, he was convicted of that charge for assaulting an officer. So you have to be here to be convicted.
Yes. So we know you're here.
So he entered the United States illegally multiple times after being convicted of crimes here in the United States, and went on to commit another heinous crime, and now ICE is looking for him
not only
again.
that, but if you look at his timeline, a month later, he has warrants out for his arrest for indecency with a child by sexual contact and obviously violent. So you have another sexual offense that this particular individual is wanted, which means another child was victimized by a repeat habitual individual who kept re-entering the country illegally, but was never punished for that. Senator Joan Huffman has filed several bills that will hopefully rectify this problem. And if we don't pass legislation that she has, God help us all. This should be a no-brainer. Here's the the gist of one of her bills is you can't get probation for any offense involving, any offense that's violent in nature or sexual in nature, especially to a child, if you're here in this country illegally. No probation.
And that bill, that kind of a law right there, that actually mitigates everything that we've talked about
Correct.
Today.
Yes.
Everything.
Correct. Sadly, Crime Stoppers has to put out a reward because you have 3 wanted fugitives. So we're offering up to $5,000 for any information leading up to the arrest of any of the wanted fugitives that we featured on this show tonight. The public is our best eyes and ears out there. We're asking someone to step up to the plate and get these individuals off the streets before they harm another person. And the best thing about Crime Stoppers is your tips are anonymous. We don't know who you are. We don't want to know who you are. And right now you're eligible for up to a $5,000 reward.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Andy. I appreciate your input.
You bet. My pleasure.
ICE also offers rewards for information that leads to the arrest or capture of these individuals. You can find all of that information below. And this is a topic that I have really been on top of over the past couple of months, not just since the new administration has come in, but over the past couple of months, I have developed a good relationship with the ICE office here in Houston to bring you up close and personal reporting about exactly what's going on. So you can find those different videos linked here below. Our Fox 26 Crime Files episodes that we do have focused on ICE over the past couple of weeks. So if you check those out, you'll get even more information on this topic. And of course, we ask that you download the Fox Local app where you can watch all of this content at your fingertips. Thanks for listening and watching this week. I'm Abigail Dye.